welcome to my first ever devlog as an indie game developer. I'm going to be just going through my project that I'm starting from basically scratch, some challenges that I had to overcome, and what I did so far. So here you'll see I started off with a tutorial, and it might be familiar to some who have tried indie gaming in the past or indie game dev. It's a roguelike tutorial that just says build a roguelike shooter, and it's on YouTube. Well, I basically just started there, and just like the video suggests, after you finish it, it says take it and make it your own. So I fiddled around with a whole bunch of different aspects because I never really did any game dev in my life, really, but I was always very interested. I went to college for computer science, but I specialized in cybersecurity, so I didn't really touch game development a whole lot. So Godot and building games in an engine was a new concept to me, especially a lot of the art and assets and all of that. So I had to kind of learn from scratch. So yeah, that's why I started with a tutorial. And I just basically ran with that tutorial. So Libre Sprite is a program that I found on Reddit that somebody suggested to use. It is a free pixel art software that you can use for Apple, which is what I'm going to be doing my development on. So I decided to check it out. So I went ahead and tried it out by building a little torch in there. 16 by 16 seemed like a reasonable measurement at the time. And I saw that it had an animation capability, so I just made a little fire animation. So that was kind of my first little, let's do this thing. So I built the little torch. I used my good friend ChatGPT to implement it into Godot, because I figured basically if I've got ChatGPT able to do instructions on how to build a game, then I have every resource I need between that, YouTube, and documentation to build a game without having a whole lot of experience in game development. So I went ahead and built that torch, and the size was a bit small, and when I scaled it up, it was quite blurry. So I wasn't really super satisfied with that, but this was just an example torch, so I just wanted to get something to show that I can do an animation. So I also was fiddling around with tiling, and ended up getting a nice little black and white tile that, I probably wouldn't keep, but I just wanted to figure out how to do that, because in the future I might need to make more complicated tile assets. So yeah, I fiddle around with the torches, fiddle around with lighting nodes, all that sort of stuff, and basically just had some fun. So basically the concept that I came up with that I wanted to develop was a 2D game top-down called Vampire Janitor. And the premise will be really fun and silly, where basically the player is stuck in a castle or manor that a vampire owns, and they feed at night, and they just leave a gruesome mess behind, and your job is to clean up that mess under threat of being killed by the vampire if you don't do it in time. So that's kind of the premise. So I just kind of wanted to break it down bit by bit. So obviously I'll need some level changes, and that's what I'm working on here, is just figuring out how do I even transition a level. There were a lot of questions that popped up during the midst of the beginning of this project, is how do I do lighting? How do I do, like I just said, level exchange? How do I do tiling? These are all things that I just slowly did over time, just bit by bit. And honestly, when I got down to it, it didn't take a whole lot to learn these things individually. The things that have taken me the longest have been creating assets, but I got a little bogged down by creating assets, as you'll see a little bit later, as I create a whole new background and stuff. But what I really should be doing is focus on development. But it was enjoyable, I gotta say. As a person who, like I said earlier, recently graduated from college in computer science, problem solving is something that I've learned to enjoy quite a bit. And there were quite a bit of problems that even arose. Even using ChatGPT and all the resources available on the internet, nothing's ever going to be perfect. But eventually, here, I got a transition in my level, something super simple, just another screen. But I felt very accomplished after these kind of things. The animations, the level changes, it was all really exciting. And here I went ahead and built a background for kind of our level 1, which is going to be like a tutorial level. So just figuring out, switching everything, again, slowly changing it from what the tutorial ended up with, creating those border walls that the player cannot walk through. And yeah, so eventually just made some progress in that way. Next, I wanted to go ahead and start implementing some of the gameplay, which, started off with a water spill. So I headed back to Libre Sprite and made just a little mock-up water spill thing. The problem is the proportions on the pixels from like my background to the water spill. The water spill ended up being really high dev comparatively, and I just decided, really, that's the moment where I was like, this asset stuff is going to take a lot longer than the actual, like, I want to develop more and get the gameplay right. So after this, cool down a bit on creating assets, and I start to try to figure out more on like functionality. So, just creating a collision with the player and the puddle to clean it up originally. Later on, that'll transform into a more functional way to do that. I still had these little mobs spawning around, which made it difficult to test for the spill. So I wanted to get those out of there eventually. Yeah, so I got those to stop spawning so I could like see, and it turns out the layering was wrong, or visibility ordering. So I went ahead and changed that. Again, I'm not super solid on if I'm doing everything 100% correct, but as long as it works functionally when I test it, I'm like, that's cool. Not every game has to be geniusly produced, especially not someone's first game. I'm not going to let that stop me. I think I've seen a good example as like Undertale, as somebody mentioned as like the worst coded game, but it was a fun game. It's a successful indie game. So I use that as inspiration to kind of drive me forward. Yeah, ultimately, I was pretty satisfied with the tutorial asset that I came up with. The problem is this was all on one PNG file, and so not a whole lot of layering able to happen. I create a little sound asset to go along with the puddle being cleaned up, that again is just another learning thing. It wasn't a very good asset, but it just sound, I just wanted to make sure I can implement sound when I walk over that puddle. So just taking it step by step and breaking it down, that's really just the way to keep yourself engaged, at least for me, and always keep learning and keep problem solving. So yeah, ultimately I was able to get a nice satisfying water spill cleanup. Right now you just kind of tap the space bar in a rhythmic way to clean it up, and I'm cool with that for now. And I look forward to approaching new challenges and going from there. Thank you for listening.